Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born James Brown Miller on October 25th, 1861, right in Van Buren, Arkansas. Most folks just knew me later on as Jim.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My folks migrated to Franklin, Texas when I was just a one-year-old infant, so Texas is where I truly grew up. My father, Jacob, was a stonemason who actually helped build the very first Capitol building in Austin. But he passed away when I was still just a young boy. After his death, my mother, Cynthia, packed up the family and moved us to Evant, Texas, so we could live with her parents. It was a hard, quiet life, but it shaped me early on.
Was there a story behind your name, or a nickname that stuck with you?
Depending on who you talk to, I had a few names follow me around. The public and the press loved to call me Killin' Jim or Killer Miller because of the reputation that trailed my shotgun. But to the folks who actually knew me in town, I was often called Deacon Jim. I earned that because I was a regular devoted attendee of the Methodist Church, and I never touched alcohol, never smoked tobacco, and never let a cuss word cross my lips. I kept an immaculate, pious front, which confused a lot of people who tried to square it with my line of work.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
As a boy, I received the typical, basic education of the frontier era. Nothing much stood out about my school days, but I was quiet, kept to myself, and learned how to survive on a farm. After living with my grandparents, I spent my later youth working on a farm at Plum Creek near Gatesville, Texas, alongside my sister Georgia and her husband.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
It probably goes back to when I took a job as a hired hand on the McCulloch County ranch of Emmanuel Mannon Clements. He was a cousin of the famous outlaw John Wesley Hardin. Clements took me in, and I felt deeply indebted to him. When the Ballinger City Marshal Joe Townsend shot and killed Clements in 1887, I made the choice to handle it. Not long after, Townsend was ambushed and severely wounded by someone hiding with a shotgun. That choice cemented my path, and the shotgun quickly became my signature tool.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
My first real taste of the legal system came when I was just 22 years old. On July 30th, 1884, I got into a severe argument with my brother-in-law, John Coop, and ended up shooting him with a shotgun while he was sleeping on his porch. I was arrested, put on trial in Coryell County, and the jury handed me a life sentence in prison. But my lawyers found a technicality, and the conviction was completely overturned on appeal. I walked away a free man, realizing early on that the law had holes if you knew how to use them.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was during my long, violent feud with Sheriff Bud Frazier in Pecos, Texas. He had hired me as a deputy, but we quickly locked horns when he suspected I was operating on both sides of the law. He tried to kill me in 1894, pumping bullets right into my chest, but he didn't realize I had a crude iron plate concealed under my heavy frock coat. The media and the public went wild over that. The climax came in 1896 when I cornered Frazier inside a saloon in Toyah and ended him with 2 blasts from my shotgun. The ensuing trials, the frantic media coverage, and the fact that an Eastland jury finally acquitted me on self-defense made me a household name across the West.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
It shifted my business model. Once word got out that I could face down lawmen, survive bullet wounds, and completely beat murder raps in court, I transitioned from a common feudist into a high-priced professional assassin. I started operating out of Fort Worth, charging anywhere from $150 to $500 a job to eliminate sheep herders, cattle rustlers, or problematic lawyers for wealthy cattlemen. The notoriety didn't change me. It just made my services highly lucrative.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
Bud Frazier was the biggest personal rivalry, without a doubt. We turned the whole region around Pecos into an open battleground for 5 years. Later on, my legal adversaries became my main targets. I had a fierce battle with a tenacious attorney named James Jarrett. who was causing problems for my associates over land claims. I ambushed him in 1902, and I always said he was the hardest man I ever had to kill.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
My private battle was always maintaining the legal charade. While the public looked at me as a cold-blooded monster, I spent my private life meticulously building an image as a solid, peaceful citizen. I moved my family to Eastland, played the role of a devoted husband, and made sure the community saw me in the church pews every single Sunday. It took an immense amount of discipline to keep those two worlds completely separate.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
In early 1909, I took a job in Ada, Oklahoma, to assassinate a former deputy U.S. Marshal and local cattleman named A.A. Gus Bobbitt. I did the job with my usual shotgun blast from the brush. The law tracked me back to Texas, arrested me, and extradited me to the jail in Ada, along with the men who hired me. But I never got to see a courtroom or use my legal tricks this time. The local citizenry was terrified I'd beat the rap again. On the night of April 19th, 1909, a massive lynch mob of local residents overpowered the jail guards, dragged me and 3 other men out to an abandoned livery stable, and took justice into their own hands.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you? And what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The craziest rumor that floated around for years was that when I was a mere 8-year-old boy, I murdered both of my own grandparents in their home. I was arrested for it back then, which fueled the myth, but I never pulled any trigger on them. They passed away of old age, but the Wild West storytellers just love to exaggerate my body count and make me out to be a cradle-to-grave monster.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
People assume that a man who kills for money must be a raving, drunken, chaotic maniac. The biggest misconception was that I was a lawless drifter. I was a family man, a landowner, a former Texas Ranger, and a saloon keeper who dressed impeccably, kept his posture ramrod straight, and lived a completely sober life. I operated like a businessman, not a crazed outlaw.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on April 19, 1909 in Ada, Oklahoma. The cause of death was an illegal hanging at the hands of a vigilante lynch mob inside a dark livery stable.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
I didn't spend my final moments wallowing in regret or confessing to the crowd. When that mob bound my hands with baling wire and stood me under the rafters, I didn't beg. My only real thoughts were for my family. I unpinned a diamond stick pin from my coat and asked that it be sent home to my wife. When they jammed my hat onto my head, my final words to the world were simply, "Let her rip!"
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
I saw myself as a man who provided a definitive, necessary service in a violent, untamed territory where the law was often weak or corrupt. I didn't view myself as a villain. I was a professional who did what he was paid to do, lived by his own strict moral code of personal conduct, and faced the rope without flinching.
Jim, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Just that the West was a place where a man had to choose his path and stand by it, coat plate or no coat plate. People will remember the Deacon, and they'll remember the shotgun. But I lived life entirely on my own terms, right up to the stable rafters.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.